Now that's what I like.
You ever rewatch a cartoon from your childhood and just sit there like, what the heck was that? Yeah, that's exactly how I felt when I went back and watched the Toy Maker episode of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. We're talking creepy dolls, a villain who feels like he escaped from a horror movie, and an ending so random, it feels like someone spliced in a PSA from another show entirely. And yes, this actually aired on Saturday mornings, right between your Fruity Pebbles and Ninja Turtles reruns. By the way, if you want to relive these kinds of nightmares in glorious fuzzy VHS quality, I dropped a link to the He-Man DVD collection down in the description. You'll want to see this one for yourself. Alright, let's talk about the episode that makes 0 sense. So the episode kicks off with this guy called the Toy Maker. At first the name sounds harmless, right? You probably picture a sweet old man carving wooden soldiers, maybe a kindly grandpa type with a long beard and a workshop full of rocking horses. You know, like Geppetto from Pinocchio. Or even a jolly Santa Claus kind of figure. Heck, maybe even that quirky elf from those old Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer claymation specials. But the second this guy steps on screen, you realize something is seriously off. This isn't a lovable old man who's gone to hand you a teddy bear. This guy looks like he crawled straight out of a bad dream. He's got this overly sweet, sing-songy voice that makes your skin crawl. And that smile? Way too wide, way too toothy, and way too forced. It's the kind of grin that doesn't make you feel safe. It makes you feel like you're about to be trapped in a basement. If you saw this guy standing in the toy aisle at your local store, you wouldn't be walking toward him. You'd be clutching your shopping cart and moving in the opposite direction as fast as possible. And in less than 90 seconds, the whole maybe he's just misunderstood theory goes out the window. We find out he's teamed up with Skeletor, and not to make harmless dolls or wind-up clowns, oh no. This man is building an entire army of living toys designed for one thing: destruction. These aren't the kind of toys you'd find under the Christmas tree. These are nightmare machines with glowing eyes, creepy little limbs, and yes, actual teeth. Teeth. The kind that look like they could bite through metal. And the worst part? Every single one of them is programmed to obey him and him alone. The whole vibe of the episode throws you off balance right away. The background music is peppy and cheerful, like you're about to watch a parade. And the colors are bright and candy-like, as if the animators wanted you to feel like this was going to be a happy, magical adventure. But underneath that sugarcoating is something way darker. The toy maker leans forward, his eyes glinting, and in the most gleeful, almost sing-songy tone, he says, "Every toy is built to obey me." I'm sorry, what? You can almost hear every kid watching at home shift uncomfortably in their seats. It's that moment when the mask comes off and you realize this isn't going to be one of those goofy He-Man episodes with Skeletor bumbling around and yelling insults. Nope, this one is already creeping into horror territory. And here's where it gets even stranger. Because if you think his introduction is unsettling, wait until you see what kind of toys he actually unleashes next. The next time we see him, we're taken into the toy maker's workshop, and right away the whole place feels wrong. On the surface, it's everything you'd expect a toy shop to be. Bright colors, shelves filled with dolls, little mechanical gizmos moving around, and cheerful background music playing like you've just stepped into a Christmas special. But the more you look, the less whimsical it gets. The toys don't look like they're meant to be played with. They look like they were meant to watch you. Their eyes follow you around the room. Their smiles are too wide, and every one of them feels like it's hiding something. It's the kind of place where you'd expect the camera to pan, and suddenly one of the dolls' heads would snap toward you. And then, as if that wasn't creepy enough, the toy maker shows us what he's really been working on. Forget rocking horses and toy trains. This guy is cranking out miniature weapons disguised as toys. There are teddy bears with laser eyes, jack-in-the-boxes that don't pop out with clowns, but with actual weapons, and wind-up tanks ready to fire. At one point, he proudly shows off a stuffed animal with a creepy grin and glowing red eyes. And the way he strokes it, like it's his favorite child, just makes it worse. But then comes the big reveal, the toys he calls his masterpiece, the Skeletoids. Imagine dozens of tiny Skeletors, complete with little skull faces, cackling laughs, and high-pitched voices that sound like nails on a chalkboard. They're small, sure, but they move in perfect formation, like an army of possessed marionettes. And the way they march forward, all giggling in unison, is nightmare fuel. There's something about seeing Skeletor, who was already terrifying as a kid, multiplied into an army of doll-sized clones that's way scarier than the real thing. The animators really went all out here. You've got close-up shots of the Skeletoids crawling up walls, some of them clinging on to each other's backs to climb higher. Their little skull faces twisted into expressions that are way too detailed for comfort. At one point, one of them looks directly at the screen, and for a second, it almost feels like it sees you. And here's the wildest part. These weren't just a gimmick. The Skeletoids were strong. Strong enough that even He-Man and Battle Cat would soon have trouble fighting them. Watching these pint-sized horrors march toward Castle Grayskull is surreal. It's like a nightmare version of the Nutcracker Ballet, with Skeletor dolls instead of toy soldiers. And while you're still trying to process the fact that He-Man's next big threat is an army of creepy, cackling toys, the show decides to crank things up even more. Because when the battle actually starts, it doesn't just feel silly, it feels wrong. So here's the question. How does the most powerful man in the universe handle getting his butt kicked by dolls? So here we are. The Skeletoids have been unleashed, and for the first time, we get to see how they actually fight. And let me tell you, it's even weirder than it sounds. He-Man shows up ready to do his usual thing. You know, flex, toss Skeletor around a bit, and save the day like it's just another Tuesday in Eternia. But the second he sees this army of doll-sized Skeletors, he hesitates. You can almost see it on his face, like he's thinking, am I really about to fight toys? But oh, he doesn't have a choice, because these little creeps don't waste any time. They swarm at him like piranhas, climbing up his legs, tugging at his arms, and scratching at his chest plate. One even manages to yank his sword halfway out of his hand. And for a moment, He-Man, the strongest man in the universe, looks like he's actually struggling. And it's not just him. Teela and Man-at-Arms show up, and they're just as overwhelmed. At one point, a Skeletoid pulls Teela's hair, while another tries to tie her legs together with a jump rope that suddenly turns into glowing energy cords. Man-at-Arms gets tackled by a group of them carrying what looks like a toy cannon. But when they fire it, it blasts him across the floor. Then there's Battle Cat. Poor Battle Cat. One of the Skeletoids climbs onto his back and actually starts steering him like a horse, yanking on his saddle straps and cackling like a maniac. And the worst part? Battle Cat looks like he can't shake him off. It's both hilarious and disturbing at the same time. And the toy maker? He's just standing there in the background, grinning ear to ear, like a proud parent watching his kids in a school play. He even claps at one point, as if to say, "Yes, my dolls are finally doing it." The whole scene is chaos. Toys throwing pies that explode, jack-in-the-boxes shooting firecrackers, teddy bears blasting laser beams out of their eyes. He-Man is blocking left and right, but for every toy he smashes, 2 more come crawling out of the toy maker's workshop. And you have to remember, this isn't Skeletor or some demon from the underworld. These are toys, literal playthings. And yet the show is playing it completely straight, like this is one of the biggest threats Eternia has ever faced. There's even a moment when He-Man finally grabs one of the Skeletoids, lifts it into the air, And instead of crushing it like a soda can, he just stares at it. The thing looks right back at him, lets out this high-pitched cackle, and then bites his hand. You heard me, bites his hand. And he actually drops it. That's the strongest man alive dropping his weapon because a toy bit him. By this point, as a kid watching, you didn't know whether to laugh, hide under the blanket, or throw your own toys in the closet. The line between silly and terrifying blurred so hard, it made the whole thing unforgettable. And just when you think it can't get stranger, the toy maker finally reveals the real reason he built these things. Spoiler alert, it makes absolutely no sense.
These are not ordinary toys. Why, my toys could bring a kingdom or a galaxy to...
So after this absolutely bonkers battle where He-Man is practically getting punked by a bunch of demonic Happy Meals toys, the toy maker finally steps out from the shadows to explain his grand plan. And you'd think, okay, here's where everything makes sense, right? Maybe these toys are secretly powered by some ancient artifact. Or maybe Skeletor is using them as a distraction for some bigger scheme. That would at least track with the usual He-Man formula. But nope, not even close. The toy maker proudly declares that with his toys, he's going to spread joy across Eternia. But then in the very next sentence, he talks about controlling everyone and taking over Castle Grayskull. Wait, what? Joy, but also world domination? How does that add up? Is this guy trying to be Santa Claus or a Bond villain? Bro, pick a lane. And here's where it gets even stranger. He doesn't just want people to play with his toys, he wants them to obey his toys. Let that sink in. His big evil scheme is to fill every home in Eternia with living dolls that basically brainwash the entire population. Can you imagine little kids getting tucked into bed while their dolls whisper, "Obey the toy maker"? That's straight out of a horror movie. The writers don't even attempt to explain how he got this technology. There's no magic crystal, no evil spell, nothing. He just has the ability to make toys come alive, and the show expects us to roll with it. It's like they knew the episode didn't make sense and just decided, the kids won't care. Meanwhile, Skeletor, who was supposed to be the main villain of the series, shows up halfway through the toy maker's rant and basically calls him an idiot. And you're thinking, finally, Skeletor is going to take over, save this episode, and make it a real He-Man plot. But nope again. Skeletor and the toy maker argue for about 30 seconds. Skeletor throws his hands in the air and then just vanishes. No fight, no plan, nothing. He's just gone, like he had a dentist appointment he forgot about. So what are we left with? A creepy old man with a toy army and a plan that's half world peace, half dictatorship, and zero logic. And the craziest part? He doesn't even lose in some epic final battle. He-Man and the gang manage to trap the toys, sure, but the toy maker himself? He doesn't get thrown in prison. He doesn't get banished. He's just taken away, smiling like he's already plotting his next move. He literally waves goodbye and says something like, "Oh well, back to the drawing board," like this was just a minor setback in his side hustle. It leaves you sitting there wondering, was this supposed to be funny? Was this supposed to be scary? Because it manages to be both and neither. And if that ending wasn't confusing enough, the show decides to crank up the weird one last time with a closing message that has absolutely nothing to do with the plot. So what moral lesson do we get after a full episode of evil toys and tiny Skeletor clones? You're not gonna believe this one.
No, it's not possible! Gods, get them!
So you'd think after all that, after He-Man nearly got taken down by what looked like a yard sale gone evil, the episode would at least give us some kind of satisfying wrap-up. You know, He-Man standing tall, Castle Grayskull safe, and maybe even a cheesy line about teamwork or not trusting creepy old men with toy factories. Something that ties the madness together. But no, this is where the episode takes its final sharp left turn into pure absurdity. The screen fades, the battle's over, the toy maker is gone, and you're sitting there thinking, okay, weird episode, but at least it's done. And then suddenly, bam, Orko pops up on the screen. You know, the little floating magician with the squeaky voice, always the comic relief? He's standing there in front of this pastel background like he's about to teach you how to tie your shoes. And what's today's lesson? After an entire episode about evil toys and a creepy old man trying to take over Eternia? Not don't trust strangers, not good always defeats evil, not even don't let tiny Skeletor clones chew on your ankles. Nope, Orko looks right at the camera and says, "Remember kids, never eat strange fruit. If you don't know what it is, don't eat it." I had to pause and rewind. Did he really just say that? After everything we'd just seen? It felt like I'd fallen asleep watching He-Man and woke up during a totally different cartoon. There wasn't a single piece of fruit in this entire episode. Not a banana, not a grape, not a single fruit basket in the toy maker's creepy lair. Nothing. And yet that's the closing moral of the story? Don't eat weird fruit? I can just imagine some poor kid watching this at home, clutching his action figures, totally confused. Wait, Mom, what about the toys that came alive and attacked He-Man? Should I be worried about my teddy bear? Or is the real danger apples? It's the most random, out-of-nowhere ending to an episode that was already bizarre from the start. And honestly, that's what makes it legendary. It doesn't tie into the plot. It doesn't make sense. It's like the writers finished the script, realized they needed a PSA, and just pulled one out of a hat. Fruit. Yeah, that works. Put that in there. And here's the wildest thing. As a kid, you didn't question it. You just nodded along like, "Okay, Orko, got it. No strange fruit." Meanwhile, your brain is still trying to process the fact that He-Man got bitten by a doll. And that's why this episode sticks with people. Because even though the battle's over, the lesson you're left with makes absolutely no sense. And it leaves you wondering if maybe the toy maker's plan wasn't the strangest part of all. Because if this is what passed for normal in Eternia, what else were they hiding in those Saturday morning cartoons?
Hey, look, there's Skeletor.
Now let's talk big picture. This episode feels like a weird mashup of 5 different cartoon pitches. It has the aesthetic of a Christmas special, the plot of a horror movie, the tone of Looney Tunes, and the ending of a health class video. Toymaker acts like a Disney villain, but in a universe where everyone's on vacation. He-Man spends half the episode confused, Teela spends it annoyed, and the viewer just along for the ride with a big, "What is happening?" expression. I know I sure was confused. No wonder this episode didn't air much in reruns. It's the black sheep of the series. Not dark enough to be banned, but not funny enough to be loved. Just strange. Gloriously, unapologetically strange. So yeah, the toy maker might just be the weirdest episode of He-Man ever made. It's creepy, it's confusing, and it's got more cursed dolls than a haunted antique store. But you know what? That's part of what makes these old cartoons so much fun to go back to. They were unpredictable, messy, and sometimes just plain nuts. If you remember this episode, drop a comment. Or let me know, what's the weirdest cartoon episode you saw growing up? And hey, if you want to rewatch The Toy Maker and witness the madness for yourself, I linked the DVD in the description. Support the channel and grab it through there. You've been warned. Thanks for watching, and don't eat strange fruit, okay? See you next time.